This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
significant and protracted
political theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Well, we find ourselves at the end of a very consequential year in politics, 2024, and we are not going to talk about that year. We're going to talk about next year, 2025, with our good friend Nathan Gonzalez, the editor and publisher of Inside Elections and Roll Call's campaigns analyst, about what we think will be the top stories of 2025, at least so far. There's already some developing storylines, and I just want to look forward. Nathan, welcome to what will be the last political theater podcast of 2024. We're going to take a short break in observation of the holidays and be back in the new year. But I thought this was a good way to round off the year with you because of your insights and your support of the newsroom, and we just seem to get along okay for a couple of old mules like ourselves. But thanks for talking about next year so soon.
Yeah, and I think this is really great because in 2024 nothing really happened, Jason.
Right.
No news events.
Right.
Nothing. So I think it's best that we turn the page and look forward.
Yeah, just brush it off. Like so much. So much dust coming from the ceiling. We're kidding, everybody. If you can't see,
people can feel the sarcasm coming from these microphones.
Laced with sarcasm.
If they don't realize it, then they probably shouldn't be listening to this anyway. But
right. I think our people may know us, and in the off chance that we've offended somebody or they think that we're rubes, well, there's almost nothing we can do to recapture them at this point. They're already lost.
At least click subscribe, even if you're offended.
Right. I guess we could talk about Blue Harvest, but hey,
that's reaching way back. We're really reaching. 2025 seems like a good place to land.
Yeah. I kind of love politics in off years, especially off years right after presidential elections, because we get things like the New Jersey governor's race. This is one of a handful of off years or statewide races in odd numbered years. We're odd people, so I guess maybe that appeals to me, or at least I'm odd. And New Jersey, we've got a couple of sort of high profile gubernatorial races, one in New Jersey and one in Virginia we'll talk about. But let's start with New Jersey because we have two House members who are going to be running for New Jersey governor. They don't have to give up their seats, which is to their advantage. They can win or lose and not have to step down from their current position. But we're talking about Josh Gottheimer and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, two Democrats. And what do we see so far? Because they're also not alone. The field has not been ceded to them in New Jersey. But one of them may be leaving if they become governor.
Yeah, I think we need to thank former president and President-elect Donald Trump for his performance in New Jersey in the 2024 elections, meaning that him coming within a handful of points, doing better than expected against Kamala Harris makes this race a little more interesting. I think coming into 2025, the thinking was that Virginia was going to be the big race, and it will be a big race, and we'll talk about it, but suddenly New Jersey is more interesting, even beyond the primary. I think that Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, without really much happening so far, it might be the initial front runner. I think she is the type of candidate that Democratic primary voters have been looking for. When we look at Democratic primaries over the last number of cycles, looking for women, looking for candidates of color to lead the party into the
helicopter
future.
Pilot, that helps, combat veteran, the kind of thing.
And part of that class of national security moms, national security candidates who came into the House in Trump's midterm, and they've kind of spread out all over. Now we have Alyssa Slotkin, who is now a U.S. senator, or going to be sworn in as a U.S. senator in a few days. Abigail Spanberger, who we'll talk about, running in Virginia, and so she's part of this. She's been part of this kind of superstar subclass of the House Democrats. So anyway, there's going to be a primary. Gottheimer has proven himself to be a huge fundraiser, and they're also, but they have the Washington connection. So maybe we're too tied up in our Beltway bubble, but I think Cheryl is at least the initial candidate to watch.
And Gottheimer, I mean, he's one of those, not just a project fundraiser, but he's one of those members who reporters like because he likes to talk, at least initially, and then you realize he likes to talk a lot. He's somebody who has a reputation for putting himself out there. He got dinged a little bit for his Spotify Wrapped playlist for the end of the year. Not a great look to sort of aggregate. He said he had aggregated his songs because it was a family Spotify playlist, but he wanted it to reflect all of his preferences, which just happened to be all Bruce Springsteen songs.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, it was, and it's just like one of those things. Like you can cultivate an image for years, in politics, and just one thing like that can really like detract if you're not careful.
It's just like an unnecessary error, right? And I guess
unforced error. Yeah,
unforced. He's not. Does that make or break the race? Probably not. But you're right. Sometimes these little things can be hard to shake as you get further into an election.
So do you see? I mean, and again, not to slight any of the several other people who have expressed interest in running for governor, but do you see this really as a two-person race for the Democratic nomination between Gottheimer and Cheryl?
The short answer is yes, but primaries are different. I've learned over the years that primaries are fraught with opportunity to mess up. But again, Cheryl has. I think Cheryl has some advantages, and again, you want to be, I think right now, still in the Democratic Party, even though Harris came up short in the presidential race, which is a huge race, obviously. I think primary voters are still, you'd rather be a woman or you'd rather be a candidate of color in order, in a Democratic primary right now.
And just looking specifically at their House districts, again, we've tended to think in the last, couple of election cycles as New Jersey as a heavily Democratic state. Trump, as you alluded to, came within 5-6 points, depending on the actual final certified vote count. But that was a lot closer than anybody had thought he would come. He had been saying all along that he thought he had a shot there. We saw some Democratic districts that look like they swung pretty heavily for him, such as the district that the late Bill Pascrell, Patterson-based district, was represented. That Trump, the Democrat won Pascrell's seat, but again, it became a lot more Republican friendly. But assuming either Gottheimer or Cheryl wins the primary, wins the governorship, are either one of their seats at this point potentially vulnerable?
I need to go look at what the final presidential numbers were in their districts. I think it would still take a lot for Republicans to win, but in a special election environment, and I should say that Gottheimer and Cheryl might have made those districts look more Democratic than what they really are because of who they are, their fundraising, and just the lack of attention that Republicans have paid to it. But in a special election environment, we should be open-minded about possibilities in districts that wouldn't normally perform the way that they should or the way that they are drawn. That's weird things happen in special elections. That's why they call them special sometimes. Yeah. So I would say Democrats are the front runners to hold those, but and I guess the environment would have to be, very Republican or a pro-Republican vantage point, which seems less likely. It seems more that there's more of a possibility that Republican open seats, there are strange things that happen if there's just a need, or voters sense a need to have more check and balance in Washington.
Right. All right. Well, let's head down, Amtrak or I-95, depending on your quote unquote preference.
It's going to take a while on 95, but
to Virginia and the race for the governor's mansion there in Richmond. Abigail Spanberger, as you mentioned, one of the national security moms, worked in the intelligence world before coming to Congress. Was elected in 2018 in that first sort of like big Democratic wave. After the first election after Trump was elected in 2016. She, sort of cut a bit of an independent, moderate / maverick streak, if you will. It wasn't somebody who went against the party line so much, but just didn't appreciate being told what to do all the time. It seems, and was somebody again who's like sort of candid with the press, and is sort of a solid public servant. She decided not to run again at all. She could have run. She could have probably won her seat, given the goodwill that she's engendered over the last couple election cycles. But she decided not to run so that she could focus on the Virginia governor's race. Her seats did stay Democratic in the 2024 election, but now she, as of January 3rd at noon, she'll be free to just be a full-time candidate for the Virginia governor's race. Virginia governors, I think they're the only ones now that are bound by just one term or one consecutive term. That is. So Glenn Youngkin, who is going to take his Patagonia, sweater vest home with him to McLean or wherever he's from. It's an open seat. These are always kind of exciting. Spanberger, though, seems like she's kind of in the driver's seat here.
Right. And it's probably good for Spanberger. I know that leaving Congress allowed her to freeze her up and freeze up her time, but her seat came close to falling into Republican hands. I mean, this was a seat that Eugene Vindeman ended up winning over Derek Anderson, and absent an unforced error by Derek Anderson with the not family photo that he posted, the race could have gone differently. And I guess it's good for Spanberger that seat wasn't what kept Democrats from winning the House of Representatives, right? They fell a few seats short, so she's probably good because that might have inspired some backlash on the Democratic side. But she has done a lot of work ahead of this. The primary, it looks like it is clear for her, although now there is talk that Congressman Bobby Scott, the longtime African-American member, is being encouraged to at least take a look at it. There's concern that Democrats about black turnout among black voters for the Democratic candidate, particularly because Republicans are likely to nominate Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, who she is also an African-American candidate. But yes, I think Spanberger she's the front runner. We'll see if Scott ends up getting in. And I think Spanberger has an opportunity to raise her profile beyond Virginia because this race and New Jersey, this race is going to get a disproportionate amount of attention. These are the only two races big races. We might get some comments. The only two big races next year, and it will get news coverage beyond the boundary lines of Virginia and its proximity to Washington, D.C. and most of the media. So if she's able to win this, kind of take it over from Glenn Youngkin and Republicans, then I think it'll raise her profile, and we'll see where she goes from there. But this is going to be a competitive race.
I can't help but think that the president-elect Donald Trump will find himself ways to get into the campaign process here in both states. In Virginia, Winsome Sears is she's very much a supporter of Donald Trump, sort of unapologetic, where at times Youngkin has sort of straddled the line a little bit. I mean, she's sort of all in. Just of note, he has golf courses in both states. So he's got a Trump golf course and used to have a Trump winery or whatever down in, near Charlottesville. And then, of course, Bedminster, where he spends a lot of time in the summer when it gets too hot at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I mean, I just can't help but think that he will be a part of this political process. Now, we don't even know, who may be a, sort of a Republican, candidate in New Jersey, but I just think that that's an interesting X factor, and not necessarily 100% positive for Republicans.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Trump likes to win. I don't know if you heard about this, Jason. He likes to be a winner, and I think
I'm not tired of winning yet, Nathan. Some people are tired of winning, but I'm not tired of winning.
He will want to make sure. I think that one or both of the candidates can win or is on the path to winning before he jumps in to take credit for the winning. I don't know how much time he's going to want to invest in the races just for the sake of and try to pull somebody up. I mean, he didn't win either state. I mean, he came closer than expected in New Jersey, but he's going to be trying to govern or trying to get things done. Maybe not govern, but he's going to be trying to.
Is he? Well, is he going to be like sitting there at the Doge meetings with like Vivek and Elon, kind of going over like, well, I don't know if we need this weapon system, but come on.
No, but he's
going to be out there.
He is going to be trying to take the opportunity to, shake up, change things, to complete revamp of government in the minds of Republicans. They think they've been given a mandate to completely overhaul the government, not necessarily given a mandate to win the New Jersey governor's race. So if he sees an opportunity to take credit and get credit for winning these races, he'll take it. I don't know that he's going to do the hard work he's going to do the work for either of the nominees.
Maybe the so-called mandate is a podcast for another time. I think when you don't get 50% of the vote, and the margins are as close as we're about to talk about, and particularly in the House, like it's hard to see that this is some overwhelming mandate, the likes of which we have never seen, things like that. I mean,
but whether we think it's a mandate or not, which I would agree that it's not, it doesn't matter. If they think they have a mandate, then that's going to guide their behavior and guide their decisions, and they believe that they have a mandate. Suddenly, the national popular vote matters after dismissing it, the Republicans dismissing it for many cycles.
Before we talk about some of those margins, particularly in the House, let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, particularly those of us who are aging, which is aging. We have, I don't know exactly how this breaks down in terms of the average age of Congress compared to the last few, but in general, we have there are a large number of members who are over 80 years old. I think it was about 18% in the 118th Congress, the Congress that we have now. Still crunching some of those numbers, right now. We've saw some deaths last year. I mentioned Bill Pascrell, who was 86 years old. That's what happens to people who are, in that age range. They get sick, they get hurt, they die. And we have had several of those older members step down from leadership positions. Mitch McConnell is stepping down from his position as minority leader of Senate Republicans. John Thune will be the incoming Senate Majority Leader. In the House, we had a sort of a generational shift after the 2022 elections, where Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn, all, a sort of triumvirate of power, but all in their 80s, they all also stepped back and sort of let a new generation of Democratic leaders take the reins, in Hakeem Jeffries and Catherine Clark and Pete Aguilar. But we still have a number of people who are in their 80s, and one in particular in his 90s who will have an outsized, sort of oversight role, and that's Chuck Grassley, who's in his 90s. I mean, is this what? I mean, aside from just, I think that there is nothing that says that you can't do your job at a certain age, but does it just inject a bit of uncertainty given how close the margins are, given how much the stakes have been raised, particularly with Republicans, to have so many people in positions of authority and influence like McConnell and Grassley who are, past the actuarial tables, if you will?
Yes. Oh, wait, but we should probably talk about more. Yeah. I think there is risk. There's risk not just from would certain members be able to finish a term or something like that, but just showing up for votes. That if events, different health events happen, that they're not able to get to Capitol Hill and participate and vote. Every vote matters. I mean, we're in a situation where every vote matters in the House, particularly because of the vacancies, the initial 3 vacancies from Stefanik, Waltz, and Gates because of the Trump going into the Trump administration. I know Gates is not on that path anymore, but resigning, he at least started that path. So every vote matters, and there's more of a likelihood that someone who is older, not being something happening and not being able to make it, and so that than someone who's younger, and that's going to potentially cause a problem because there's no margin for error for the leadership of either party. And Jason, can I say, I guess you allowed me to come on here, so we'll see if this makes the cut. But I think we can explore an age maximum for Congress or for service. And some folks are going to say, oh, you can't do that. It's discriminating. And I would say we already discriminate. You have to be 25 years old to serve in the House, 30 for the Senate, 35 for president. We already have age minimums. We're already discriminating on age. So coming up with a number, I don't know what that number is. It seems like it would be lower or younger than 80 or a bit because there are people who can do this that are younger than some of these folks that are serving right now.
Well, and it's not uncommon for police departments, fire departments, the military, all other different forms of public service to have age limits for which point you can't serve. I mean, obviously in something like a fire department, it makes a lot of sense. You don't want like people who, could break their hip, climbing into buildings and so forth that are on fire. But I do think that there is to me, it seems like a very natural thing that at a certain point you say, I've done what I can. I have served my country. I've served it well, and I'm stepping away. And it's hard to see somebody like, for instance, Derek Kilmer, who turns 51, on New Year's Day, right? And he's leaving, after a few terms in Congress. He served as the chairman of the Select Modernization of Congress Committee. Before coming to Congress, he worked at a consulting firm, quality control. I mean, he's like the type of person who you want to see in public service, and he's walking out the door.
He could be a chair in 2060,
right?
The current path,
right? But it's kind of admirable. He's like, I've done what I can, with the time that I have, and now it's time for a new chapter. I don't need to be here forever. I don't need to be, to have a fulfilled life or to actually serve my constituents. There's somebody else who's, perfectly good to take my place. And he left the door. And then on the other hand, you've got folks who I feel bad pointing this out, but Nancy Pelosi fell and had a, hip surgery. She's in Luxembourg. That's like a scary situation. And also, potentially, I mean, who knows what the schedule is, but that could complicate her attendance and her votes. McConnell fell also last week in the Senate, at lunch, and had to be tended to by medical personnel, and people didn't know what was going on. And again, in a chamber, the Republicans have a little bit more of a cushion in the Senate. It's a 53-47 margin, as opposed to what it will be a 53-47 margin when they're sworn in. That is, whereas in the House it's 220 to 215, and they'll actually start 219 because Gates won't take a seat. but still, I mean, it's just kind of it's scary, and age became the issue in the presidential race too. After the June debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, when Biden was obviously not having his best day. I think it solidified for a lot of people their concerns about a president in his 80s. Trump is not that much younger.
He's the oldest person we've ever elected president because he's older than what Biden was.
Right. At this point, I mean, again, everybody's different. Everybody has different genetics and different things that they've done to either keep themselves healthy or not healthy. But, again, time undefeated. Right. Mortality is undefeated against mortals. And I just feel like this, for some reason, we are not able to get a handle on this and talk about it intelligently. And again, people will probably hate us, for bringing this up. But, when you get into your 80s, should you be working? Should you be making decisions about trillions of dollars in the budget and so forth? I don't know. It seems.
And maybe it has whatever law has to be written in a way to grant. I was going to say grandfather in, but we were great grandfathering in as members, sitting members, and that's a way to get around it. But this does, to me, play into a larger dynamic that we see in the country, and that dynamic is a fundamental distrust of institutions, distrust of government, distrust of politicians, and I think part of that disconnection that people have. Feeling of disconnectedness with government is that it is perceived to be being led by people who are very old and not in touch with what an average or a normal person is feeling. And so I think this discussion is part of a wider dynamic, and it's not just, older people shouldn't hold public office. I think that it hurts the overall image of Congress and the institutions when there's people that are old that are leading.
And I will say this though too. I mean, Donald Trump did okay with young people. By embracing how people get their information, whether it's a podcast like Joe Rogan's, that he went on. I mean, it doesn't seem to have hurt him in the same way that we're talking about hurting institutions, having, basically folks who I wouldn't expect that if I'm in my 80s that roll call will still want me around. Right. as the editor.
Oh, Jason, we will always
pat me on the head.
And yeah, you have to give credit. You have to give Trump credit for winning and for doing better than usual among younger voters as a Republican. But
as an older Republican too.
I think that is different than when you hear Republicans defend Grassley saying that, well, he won. Voters had the opportunity to kick him out, and he won. That really wasn't a competitive. I would challenge anyone to tell me who the Democrat against Chuck Grassley was. That was not an exchange of a public exchange of ideas where people were wrestling with it. His age, it was just that he was incumbent and has universal name ID, and Trump did win a very competitive race, and so that's to say more, but. A lot of these older members, they just kind of keep rolling through because they have those advantages of incumbency.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not stick around too long with that topic and get to the next one, which is, again, the margins are just super tight. And again, let's dispense with the Senate first. I mean, the Senate is in Republicans are. This is really going to be a debate among themselves about how far they can go with tax cuts, with budget cuts, with whatever they want to do on the border. I mean, Democrats, they do have the filibuster, but there's also ways of getting around that, like the reconciliation budget process. Nominees, they can't really stop them. So Republicans are really in the driver's seat, with a 53-47 margin on almost everything except for the most complex language. And honestly, if they want to get rid of the filibuster, they could. And they could do it all by themselves. So let's just put the Republicans' Senate aside, just saying that they're in a pretty good position. But in the House, I mean, this is just kind of nuts. And this is the closest margin in almost 100 years. 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. The Republicans will start out -1 because Matt Gaetz is not taking his seat. And I guess he's going to work for One American News or something like that. So they'll start out at 219. And then when Donald Trump is inaugurated, Michael Waltz will leave the House. And so that'll make it 218. And then if, depending on when Elise Stefanik is confirmed, and I'm guessing she will be confirmed as UN ambassador, that'll be a third vacancy. So there is a, possibility that they could be down to 217, 215, like the skinniest of margins available by the end of January. And those elections in Florida will not happen until April. Depending on when Stefanik leaves, like Kathy Hochul is a little more bound to do the special election in New York. But this is, the Republicans are talking about again, reinventing government and cutting whole programs out of, cloth and building the wall and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. It seems like you're just one vote away at any point, or one person getting pneumonia or one person's flight getting canceled because of weather from not being able to work your will, even with the majority.
Right. And that's why Republicans are hoping they can do a lot through just executive orders and do as much through the White House as possible. I would move. It's not just a logistical issue of is everyone going to be there to vote, and you have the votes and enough seats filled, but it empowers every individual member that the House is going to look more like the Senate in a way that an individual member or a very small group of members can really throw a wrench into things. And I would say that there are some Republicans who are going to clash with President Trump in a way. I think Republicans broadly, this is Trump's Republican Party. He is going to get a lot of what he wants, but there will be some Republicans who fashion themselves as true conservatives from a policy perspective and will be debt and deficit hawks who will say, okay, yeah, I'm in favor of these broad principles that Trump and the Republican Party want, but how are we going to pay for this? What's the bottom line? And in the end, I think Trump's going to get what he wants, but it could be a bumpier or rockier road to get there, because members realize that their vote is needed. So, and if every Republican's not on board, that's going to force Speaker Johnson to look to Democrats for help. And that has been how sometimes things get passed, but that's part of what got Speaker Kevin McCarthy in trouble, is working with Democrats and using Democrats to get things. And I'm not sure there's an appetite on the Democratic side to really help Republicans with anything that they want to do. So
I was going to say, I can't help but think that Hakeem Jeffries is not going to loan a few votes on the Democratic side so they can bypass all Democratic opposition and force through a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut that favors multinational corporations. I think sure, keep the government open, through a continuing resolution, but build the wall, probably not.
If he wants to keep the job, it's going to be.
I'll say this too.
Challenging for Republicans.
One thing that hasn't gotten a lot of attention outside of sort of legal circles and legal journalism is that the largely Republican constructed legal theories targeting things like people's eyes. I can already feel them glazing over. Targeting particularly legal precedents set by Chevron Defence, which is a Supreme Court decision from the 80s that said when the language in the statute is not clear, you defer a judge in a situation defers to the executive agency to write rules and regulations as they see fit. That's gone now. Primarily because of Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices and Republican legal theories, particularly those promulgated by the Federalist Society and furthered by Mitch McConnell. So Chevron deference, the idea that you defer to the executive agencies, which are now going to be appointed primarily by Donald Trump, at least their leadership, it may not be as easy to do things through executive order as they think. It is, I think that let's talk about the real winners from the 2024 election. trial lawyers. they're already like, counting the billable hours in terms of what's going to get challenged in court. I mean, so much is going to be challenged, and we're in new legal territory here because Congress tends to defer on a lot of things or take a pass on being specific. So.
Right. Yeah. And if we're going to rely on Congress if we need Congress to be more specific when it comes to regulations, then that's going to be a problem, because the more specific you get, the more difficult it is to get consensus on issues, because that's where literally
the devil's in the details.
I wasn't going to say it, but I led us down that path, so I apologize for.
Well, we didn't start out talking about New Jersey, the New Jersey Devils, hockey. I see where you're going. I get it.
But they're pretty good. They're pretty good this year. I'm not a hockey fan, but it could be a contender.
Somebody else from New Jersey said that at one point, or at least a movie set in New Jersey. It's on the waterfront, by the way, for those who are really scratching their heads. All right, last thing: retirements and candidate recruitment. People always do retire. It's a fact of life, despite what are bemoaning on some of the folks who tend to stick around for a long time. But we're already talking about, whether this is McConnell's last term, whether he's just going to serve out his term and then leave. There's always somebody unexpected who retires too. Mike Braun, I didn't see that. I thought he would be, content with maybe like 2 terms. What are you looking at this early, junction, in terms of like some of the big retirement watches and how that may affect the balance of power?
Yeah, I think we have to. First of all, there's no off year. Someone approached me a few weeks ago. Like, well, what do you guys write about the off year? I'm like, off year? I'm not familiar with this term that you're talking about. And I say that because there's a lot of the important work of an election cycle gets done in the non-election year, meaning senators, members make decisions on whether they're going to run for re-election, and the candidates try to recruit challengers or recruit their candidates into races before the election. We even get to the election year. And when it comes to retirements, it's easy to go to the old, let's look at the old folks. But Congress, the environment of Capitol Hill, and Congress is in a place where I think anyone of any age might decide that this is not for them, or they have a better job, they have better things to do with their time. Specifically if we do the Senate first, I think looking at Senator Susan Collins, which indications are that she will seek re-election and she'll be a difficult foe, but that's a very important race. I mean, that is almost every race is a must-win for Democrats if they want to gain the 4 that they need to get back to get to the majority. But that's a big one, and that may impact whether Jared Golden, the Democratic member of the House who represents the 2nd District, whether he runs or not. And from Golden's perspective, getting elected to the Senate, getting elected statewide in Maine is better or easier than getting elected in his 2nd District, which is the rural district that Trump carried. But he did used to work for Senator Susan Collins early in his career and may not be itching to run against her if it's an open seat. But if let's say he does run in whatever scenario the Senate is, then that, I guess, is kind of a retirement from the House, and that would be challenging for Democrats to hold his House seat. So there would be a domino effect there. In the House, I'm kind of cherry picking here, but if someone like Congressman Mike Lawler of New York runs for governor of New York, that would be a challenge. He did a good job of winning re-election in a redrawn district. But it would be challenging for Republicans to hold that seat. And so I don't call that not really retirement when you're seeking another job, particularly another big political job, but it's an exit from Congress that could have an impact on the overall fight. And Golden and Mike Lawler are youngish, for Congress, youngish folks.
Compared to me.
And there are 36 races. We talked about Virginia and New Jersey governor's races next year. In 2026, 36 states are electing a governor. So there will be a lot of opportunity for House members, senators to leave and to try to run for those offices. Some of them won't have to leave. There's an article I believe in semaphore about New Mexico Senator Martin Heinrich potentially running for governor in New Mexico, but he was just elected and wouldn't have to give up his seat. So sometimes the circumstances matter in those places as well.
Yeah. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for going through. We'll keep you to this. We will revisit this at the end of 2025 to make sure that this was all golden. But thank you very much. I mean, and sincerely, thank you so much for being a part of this year's podcast. I mean, you're probably our most frequent guest. I always value your insight, and I think that, and I know that you're busy too because you got your own podcast, your own newsletter. You write for Roll Call, so.
Speaking of that, I need to finish that story, Jason. It's coming.
Yes.
It's coming. I promise. Stay tuned,
where is
folks.
that? Stay tuned. But thank you very much. And thank you, listeners out there, for hanging with us for another year. We're going to take a little break for the holidays, but we'll be back in early January. Until then, we'll see you in the podcast. You can't really see you in the radio. That was a Charles Osgood thing. Anyway, we'll see you later.